So everybody says all these negative things about the prequels. Oh, the dialogue's not this, the story's not that, such and such, so on and so forth. But take a look at some of these scenes in the prequels. One scene that I really liked was the speeder chase scene. In episode 2 of the Attack of the Clones, check out this scene. It was unbelievable. The cinematography was so complimentary to the scene, and there was so much weight and tension behind it. It got you immersed in the experience and gave me huge chills, even giving me a little bit of a reminder of what happened in A New Hope. But it was just unique enough to separate itself as its own unique scene as well. Listen to the actual chemistry between the characters. It's done in a really unique way, in an elegant way, with a little bit more intellect in it, but it still has that Star Wars charm and feel. That's interesting and unique. The scene at the bar, all the tension, all the weight that this scene had. And some of the moments here just really add to the experience. And this was so immersive. Oh my god, this is one of the best scenes in the saga. Oh man, how did we get captured like this? We're smarter than this. This has some of the best dialogue and some of the best lines I've seen in Star Wars. And I love the original trilogy, but listen to the lines here. These lines work so well, so loyal to these characters, so loyal to that world. And it seems got a charm to it too. Nobody on planet Earth can tell me that this is not one of the most well-written, well-acted scenes in the entire saga. Always on the move. Come on. It was so, that flow was so on point. The dialogue was excellent. The build-up was so good to that moment, to those scenes. Oh my god, and it's so loyal to Obi-Wan's character. That's what made it such a great scene, and it was so iconic and loyal to his character. It felt just like something that Obi-Wan Kenobi would do and say, and it was iconic as hell. All these great moments in this trilogy, all these incredible scenes that add to the world, to Star Wars, to its universe, to the world. I mean, look at this. Who are you, I Hate Everything, when you sat here and trashed the prequels for years, just like Plinkett, just like Cosmonaut, just like all the other people who got inspired by Plinkett and inspired to shit on the movies because they didn't like it as well, and they hopped on the bandwagon of Plinkett because there are people who didn't even have an issue with it until they saw his video. So the thing is, who are you to sit there and then say that people are nitpicking and cherry picking? That's what you do with the prequels all the time. So what makes it so bad when somebody does it with the new trilogy? You guys even go to as far as saying A Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones are some of the worst movies ever made. Okay, so I have free ball and range to say that The Rise of Skywalker is the worst Star Wars movie ever made. I can say that with confidence, and is one of the most underwhelming movies I've ever seen. And I can't think of, because I've seen bad movies, there's plenty of them out there. But this one's special because it's the third movie in the Star Wars trilogy, the newest trilogy. And it's that bad. I can say that. So you're going to say that those movies are the worst, and it's like, okay, well, the new trilogy is the worst. Go ahead. Shit on the prequels, yeah. You know, you think that they're so bad, and you tell everybody on the internet that all the time, and they hop on the Plinkett bandwagon, and usually just go with the same exact shit that Plinkett was saying, and then hop on that bandwagon. However, who are you to sit there then turn around and say that fans are not true fans, they're just haters, just because they don't like the new movies? Because you can't believe or even fathom the fact that people don't like the new trilogy. Like, it's impossible to not like the movies the same way you didn't like the prequels. When it comes down to Anakin and many characters in the movie, they accuse these characters of having bad acting, bad this, bad that. Well, I saw it, and I thought that it was a very unique and interesting interpretation of Star Wars characters. In a galaxy far, far away, they're not going to speak the exact same way that you see people speak like on Earth. So that's how I see it, you know. But look at how they speak in the sequel trilogy. Let's say you want to take that into account. Oh my god, the acting. Oh my god, the scenes. And I'll admit, there are some acting hiccups. Yeah, there are scenes where the acting could have been a little better, I guess. But overall, there are scenes where the acting is actually really good, and they don't really acknowledge it. So that blows my mind. So let's take the bad acting into account, though. Alright, so there's some scenes where the acting is bad. What about the sequel trilogy? Let's go, Chrome Dome. Really? And some of the stuff they said in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, some of the most over-the-top acting I have seen in years. But yet, some of the scenes I like. So when I see the prequel trilogy, yeah, there's some moments where the acting isn't all that, but then there's so many moments where the acting is really good. And it's like, oh, that's not that bad. And some of those scenes are pretty good. And I'm like, oh, that was clever. And they'll have some clever dialogue put in there. And I'm like, that kind of clever dialogue. Never seen it done like that in a movie because it's Star Wars. It's done in that Star Wars style. I like that. That's kind of badass. You know, so that's what makes me enjoy the prequels and enjoy the dialogue because a lot of the dialogue is made up like that. And of course, it is not regarded or appreciated or even mentioned by people who talk about the sequel trilogy. But then they won't even acknowledge the fact that in the sequel trilogy, guess what? There's moments with corny ass dialogue, really bad lines, and some hand fisted scenes. What a dialogue is corny as hell. And here's the thing it goes deeper. Because if you see the original trilogy had corny dialogue too. Some of the corniest lines in cinematic history, written by Lawrence Kasdan, someone who isn't even George Lucas, and yet he wrote corny dialogue. And here's the funny thing. They accused George Lucas of writing corny dialogue and clunky dialogue, right? But when Lawrence Kasdan finalized his script for Empire and Return of the Jedi, listen to these corny-ass lines that made it into the final product of the movie. So corny. So many of them. And they're corny. Every last one of them. Even the most cinematic, popular one being, no, that's not possible. No. Yeah, that was corny as hell. And yet, they get on episode 3. No! What is the difference between that scene and Empire Strikes Back? They're just as corny. So that same cheese that you see in the original trilogy itself is in the prequels. Okay? And guess what? Then, the sequel trilogy. And what made that corny? The fact that they tried so hard to match the energy and, so hard to match the charm and wit of the original trilogy by duplicating it and really forcing it down your throat. And they forced it down your throat so hard and said, see, this is the original trilogy again. Don't worry. This is Star Wars. That it came across as over the top, as someone trying to be Star Wars so hard. They claim that the meaning of the lightsaber is lost because Yoda decides to pick it up. Because he has one. The meaning of Jedi is lost because they're generals. This is so stupid. First off, they had to fight the war because they had no other way of fighting it because people kept separating into separatists. They were backed into a corner and didn't have a choice but to fight the war. Hence the Clone Wars. In many other parts of the Star Wars universe, they fought many wars and many battles for different reasons. In this world, in this time period, in Star Wars, they were monks. They were or highly detached, very spiritual with the Force and everything. So they were not about fighting. However, they had to anyway. That's interesting. That's just a different version or a different reason as to why they had to fight. So they might have to do things they normally don't do. That's number one. Number two, the fact that he picks up a lightsaber does not defeat his meaning. Because in Empire Strikes Back, he might have learned even more in exile than he did even in the Jedi Order. You could assess that because characters change and develop over time. And why? Well, here's the thing. He did go in exile, and he still spoke wisdom. He spoke wisdom in the prequel trilogy, and he spoke wisdom in Empire Strikes Back. So it still matches his character. He didn't break consistency. He was still Yoda. He's still being himself. Except this time, he learned a thing or two from the 30 years he had been away. Did not have his lightsaber for whatever the reason might have been, and he had to use the Force instead of using his lightsaber. That's very good, and that shows good storytelling. And again, I know I mentioned the fact that Luke's storytelling was off-screen, but they went through a huge character shift, and it's off-screen. It's not even explained. So I guess you could say something as small as you using a lightsaber in the past is one thing, but something as huge as you killing a kid because you're afraid is a whole new ballgame. That's got to be explained in some way, or at least there's got to be some development in that or something. But yeah, you don't even have to show Yoda, and it still makes sense. You don't even need to. You don't even need the context of the fact that his lightsaber, and it still makes sense. You know, he just used a lightsaber back then. He doesn't anymore. Really that simple. It doesn't defeat his character. It doesn't change it. And it is awesome to see him fight with a lightsaber. It is absolutely amazing. And he has some of the best lightsaber fights in the saga. These are some great fights. And when he fought Count Dooku in Attack of the Clones, this is amazing. An excellent fight. Not sure why they hate on it just because, oh, this defeats Empire. I'm so tired of that. Or it defeats the meaning of the lightsaber. See how it's meaningful? Or the meaning of that scene, the fact that you didn't need a lightsaber. See, that's what makes that meaningful is the fact that he didn't have a lightsaber, not the fact that he wielded one at one point. It doesn't matter if he wielded one. What matters is that he learned the lesson. The lesson is even without a lightsaber, you could still wield the Force. That's it. So the fact that he doesn't have his lightsaber the way he did in the prequels, how does that defeat something like that? You know? And midichlorians might be a different conversation because they claim that it takes away the subtlety of the Force. But for me, it's like, how does it take away the subtlety when it's just topping it up to a science? Yoda, that's a stretch. What about Yoda? That's a stretch. Just because, oh, he wielded a lightsaber at one point, it's not special anymore. That's crazy. So what would they rather have? Him never wield the lightsaber even when he was in the Jedi Order? You could have done that, but it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether he wielded it during the Jedi Order or not. What matters is that he doesn't have it in Empire Strikes Back. That's what they're not seeing, because the fact that he doesn't have it, that's pretty easy to fill in the gaps there. It's a very short thing. It's a simple little story. It's not like a huge story like with Luke and Kylo. That's a big story. The Jedi Order, rebuilding the Jedi Order. What happened after these 30 years? The battle happened after the Clone Wars, after Return of the Jedi. All this stuff went down. None of that is explained at all. None of it. I mean, you even had them referencing the Clone Wars in A New Hope. So even that has a little bit of context. There's nothing like that here. I think they actually briefly mentioned the Clone Wars in TFA one time. Literally. So I'll give them that. Okay. But what about what happened after Return of the Jedi? Shouldn't they be referencing that? I don't even know if they reference it like that. So it is so confusing. And you don't explain all these things, the new Jedi Order, all this stuff for 30 years, and Luke's huge decision and his character shift. Again, unexplained. It just doesn't make any sense. But Yoda, whether he wielded a lightsaber, that's simple. Okay, he just doesn't have it in Empire. He decided not to have it, or he lost it before Empire. That's simple. Luke lost his lightsaber in Empire Strikes Back. When you see Empire Strikes Back, it falls. And apparently someone caught that shit. Apparently, believe it or not, this lightsaber was caught. I am not kidding here. They actually added this into the story. They've been trying to explain this since the expanded universe. So, but here's the thing, that's different. So you see the story as to how Luke Skywalker lost his lightsaber. So does that kill the meaning now that he wields a green lightsaber? Or if you saw that Luke never wielded a lightsaber in Return of the Jedi, would that defeat the meaning if you found out that in Empire he wielded one at one point? Yeah, maybe the reason why they're not wielding it now is because at some point they decided to not wield a lightsaber. You deciding not to wield the lightsaber doesn't defeat the meaning of a lightsaber. It just means that at one point you learned that you didn't even need a lightsaber. So yeah, some people might learn differently about the Force than others. Remember, Yoda was over 900 years old when he died, so there might have still been more for him to learn about the Force when he went into exile. And he eventually went into communion with Qui-Gon Jinn. He learned all kinds of stuff. So it just doesn't make any sense. Something as small as that is stupid. Then you have him being a general. Oh my God. I should not hear Yoda say that he can command soldiers. I didn't even care about this when I saw this movie. This is ridiculous. And even when I took Red Letter Media into account, that was not one of my criticisms. That's shocking. So criticisms is usually what people were saying. Oh, the dialogue, the acting, the moments, etc. Really just the same things that they said, really. That's what's kind of unfortunate. Which is why they really need to reassess the movies and update their criticisms. Because they just haven't. These are outdated as hell, and we've been over this already. But anywho, there's a movie that was critically panned, Stay. Later garnered more critical acclaim over the years. So, yeah. The thing is, the whole idea about, he's a general. Okay, so remember, the Jedi were pushed into a position due to the Separatists rising, that they had no choice but to fight even though they were monks. They're very spiritual, with the Force, so they don't fight, but they had no choice. So they had to. So which is kind of cool. So you get to actually see these detached monks go on these epic fights. They just had to, which is interesting because they're monks, because they're detached. The fact that they're not supposed to fight, but they're put into a position where they have to, is what makes it so compelling. That's what I like about the Jedi. They're very detached, but then they do these great things, and you get to see this in the prequels, which made me look up to them as a kid. That's what made me. It's the story, you know. That's what made me realize that it wasn't just the original trilogy that really made me look up to being a Jedi. It was seeing the Jedi Order, seeing how they do things, seeing what they went through. Okay, so if there was something called the Clone Wars, someone had to fight it. You don't have a choice, especially when you have characters like Yoda and all these other Jedi here who have to fight at some point. So you have to explain if they fought, that means they had to command an army. Which means if they had to command an army, you would have to have a character like Yoda say something like, man these turrets, do this, do that. They had to, literally. I mean, that's the only way, because remember, it's a clone war. It's a war. Someone's got to command it. Who are you going to get? You're going to get the Coruscant army, and the Jedi just are there for backup and support? Yeah, but even if they're there for backup, they're going to eventually command someone because they're on the field of battle. So even if you made the Jedi backup, they would eventually tell a soldier, hey, you got to do this. Because at some point, you got to command somebody, because the soldier's going to move to an area. They might be split from the Coruscant Guard. What if they're split from the Guard? Then they don't have a choice but to command those soldiers anyway. So you would still have yet another situation where a character like Yoda would have to say to man these turrets or to do this or to do that. So again, Cosmonaut is so off. I don't know what he's talking about. He is just wrong about it. He is, and that's just how I see it. This is me. Again, they need to reassess those movies. Fundamentally explain to me what is wrong with Yoda holding a lightsaber in the prequels. Fundamentally explain to me what is wrong with the Jedi Order commanding soldiers. And just because of the fact that, it doesn't match the Jedi way. But what if they have to do something that they normally don't do in order to fight the war? So they got to explain that, because how else are the Jedi going to fight? If they have to defend themselves, what else are they going to do? They got to fight that war. That's like literally the only way. So they got to explain that. Regardless of whether or not Yoda wields a lightsaber or not, he would still have to command soldiers. He would still have to fight. Even if he's not wielding a lightsaber, he would have to use the Force to fight. So he would still do the same thing anyway. It would just be in a different way. In one way, it would be Yoda without the lightsaber, just wielding the Force against people who are using lightsabers. In another way, he would use a lightsaber and use the Force. So what is the difference here? The only difference that you're complaining about is the fact that Yoda doesn't wield it. Just because in Empire he didn't wield it, when all you got to do is just say that years later he decided not to wield it, which is really stupid. Remember, a small explanation to something as small as that, as whether or not someone wielded a lightsaber prior, is so different from a character shift over a period of years, what happened to this order or that faction over the period of years, etc. I hate nihilism. I hate those movies. Yeah, and you know what's nihilistic? The Last Jedi. That's a very nihilistic movie where just everything just goes to shit, fuck everything, just fuck it all. I hate that shit. I don't like that. That's what it felt like to me. It feels like nihilism. In regards to like the Force and Star Wars in general. Nihilistic. Well, fuck all that shit. Just do whatever the hell you want. And regardless of whether it becomes like Marvel or something, it's really stupid. I hate nihilism. I don't like it when you're just like, fuck it all, fuck everything. It's like, no, I want to solve it. I want there to be a conclusion or a solution or something. In a movie, I feel like there should be an actual conclusion, not nihilism. Nihilism, there's no conclusion and everything goes to shit. How is that even satisfying? I hate that. I hate nihilism. I'm not about anarchy, like Zahir, for instance. Um, yeah, Legend of Korra had an interesting villain with Zahir. But the issue I had with him is I fundamentally disagreed with him. I'm not gonna get into like super things. Like I'm just gonna mainly focus on just his anarchistic beliefs. I do not agree with that at all. Not even a little bit. I am not an anarchist. So when you bring anarchy into it, it's like no. Now I'll admit that the Joker's perception of anarchy is quite fascinating, and I do think that it's interesting to challenge the hero and to see if the hero can live long enough to become the villain.
That concept is quite fascinating. The way they tackled it was done extraordinarily well. However, I still do not like anarchy and nihilism. I am firmly against it, and I firmly believe that The Last Jedi is a nihilistic movie. So let's say you subtract the fact that he's a kid. The real issue is a question of morality as to him being a child. It wouldn't matter. The point is, he is an innocent person who is asleep at night. He hasn't done anything wrong, and you had a vision, and based off of a vision, now you want to kill him, and you have demonstrated no instinct to kill prior. Not only is that contradictory, but it also makes no sense as to why you would want to kill someone based off of a vision, a person who has not done anything. It is not a question of morals. It is a question of what makes sense for that character.
Now, I've heard other YouTubers say this as well.
I agree.
JJ Plagiarism has a point where he says this. One thing that a YouTuber like JJ Plagiarism states is that people have not reassessed these movies. But here's what I'm saying. These guys have the same tired old arguments. And I've been saying this since 2018. The same tired old arguments for why the prequels suck. Well, you guys really need to start reassessing the movies and reanalyzing them instead of regurgitating the exact same things that people have already been saying about them for the past 20 years. Not 10 years, 20. I've been watching Nostalgia Critic for literally a decade, since the year 2013, 14, around that same time. And man, it's been a while. So yeah. Same old tired ass arguments for why the prequels suck. I've heard these. You need to reassess these movies. If you're going to keep saying that there's something wrong with the prequels, at least reassess it and update your viewpoint, because honestly, they just sound out of date. I've heard these already, and honestly, I'm tired of hearing the same thing. Because if you're going to say that same thing, guess what? I mean, if you're going to get on those movies, trust me, I could get on the new trilogy. I have heard this so many fucking times. Prove it. Prove it. Prove it. If you're going to say something as bold and ambitious as, oh, well, guess what? The prequel era contradicts everything that happened in the original trilogy. Prove it. Oh, yeah? Prove it. What about the storytelling and characters in the prequel trilogy contradict the original? I'm just saying, like, you gotta prove something like that. You can't just make a bold statement like that, skip past it, and you don't prove it. Plinkett claimed the same thing, except he brought up points that were not true, such as the lightsaber. He claims that because Anakin Skywalker, lost his lightsaber in Attack of the Clones, this invalidates the importance of a lightsaber. But this is why I made a video on that scene, because that scene is one of the main scenes that he talks shit about, which is why I've always wanted to make a video refuting his bullshit. So basically, and videos talk about the prequels in general. Definitely. This is why I want to do that. And if you pay attention to one of the most important scenes in Plinkett's review, he gets on that scene about the lightsaber, but one of the most important scenes in the movie says, "This weapon is your life," which directly contradicts what Plinkett tried to say about the prequels when he claimed that they invalidated the importance of the lightsaber and the Force. What about that scene? What about that moment? Why did he grab it and keep it for Anakin and tell him that this lightsaber, this weapon is your life? Why would he say something like that? Because it's that important. You claimed they invalidated its importance. You did not prove it. Plinkett has done the same thing for years and years, focusing so much on the jokes and the humor behind, ooh, look at this piece of shit turd, not thinking about the intellectual point of the film. Because if you're going to critically assess a movie, you have to actually critically assess the movie itself, the actual substance behind the film. You got to know what you're talking about. And Plinkett, honestly, he is very biased. That's the problem. He's so consumed by his bias. Actually, JJ Plagiarism pointed this out too, that he let his feelings get in the way. But it's okay to have emotions and stuff, but for me, JJ says that he let his feelings get in the way. I say that he's biased and he let his bias get in the way of the intellectual point. So busy trying to make fun of the movies, not focusing on the substance and intellect behind the films. And he was wrong. Because when you see that scene at the lightsaber, that directly contradicts what he claimed. There's many other moments like that throughout his entire hour-long analysis. They're each hours, dude. And he has so many things that he just gets way off, but yeah. All you gotta do is respond to being a YouTuber, and then you just script what you record. It's just another little strategy. Well, enjoy it. Have fun. Some movies are meant to just be for the sake of fun, right? The Force Awakens is not meant to be taken seriously. It's meant to just be for the fun of it. But here's the thing. When I'm watching a movie, I kind of need a little bit of substance in the film. I need to feel like it's just I'm being intellectually stimulated somewhere. Just something. Without this, I don't know. I've seen movies that aren't really about, the whole intellect behind it. I still enjoy it. But, I've seen many films, that really stimulated me. So, it depends. But honestly, when it comes down to something like The Force Awakens or something like The Last Jedi, I just feel like they just don't stimulate me in that way. They're really meant to be, I don't know, watched maybe for the fun of it, I suppose, especially The Force Awakens, which is good for the fans who like that. If that's what you want, go for it. I was just, I don't know. Even when I sit down just for the fun of it, for The Last Year, I don't really tend to go back to rewatch the film. I don't have any reason to. For The Force Awakens, I try just for the fun and action. Like, oh, that's kind of fun. Actually, that's what draws me back. But I usually tend not to finish it. And even back when I did years ago, I ended up just going back to the prequels and the original trilogy, because then I ended up thinking, you know what, now that I saw this, I kind of want just a little bit more substance in Star Wars, just a little bit. And then I would go back. And yeah. Now, you're wrong there. Yeah, George Lucas gave a shit. That's wrong. I don't know where you're getting this from. George Lucas cared about it. He had passion behind Star Wars. He's the one who made it. How are you going to say that the very person who came up with the very concept of what Star Wars even is doesn't care? That's really stupid. But you're going to talk about those corporations, a corporation that betrayed his legacy and threw away his script. They suddenly care? You want to go there with R2 and C3PO? How many fucking times have you seen those two characters shoved in your fucking face out of nowhere in the new trilogy? Again, if you're going to get on the prequels, you better be fucking consistent. The one dude out of your little Plinkett fan base that has been consistent on that is actually Plinkett himself. And I still can't stand him anyway, despite him having that kind of consistency. I'll give him that. That's the one thing I'll give him, is that he's at least consistent. I don't agree with shit he's saying, and I think he's overrated as hell. But at least he's consistent. He hates the new movies and the prequels. You're going to sit there and... What? This is ridiculous. You can't trash the prequels, right? For the same goddamn thing the sequel trilogy did, but then turn around and dick ride the new trilogy, and then trash the prequels for that same thing. Don't you see how that's the same thing? It's the same thing. I mean, you could be biased if you want to be biased. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm pointing out your bias, your hypocrisy, your fallacy. It's hypocritical. This is what I mean. Like, people always get on the prequels, and I'm like, okay, what about the new movies? Well, the new movies have their own issues. When it comes down to the issues of the prequels in comparison to the new movies, you got to understand that the new films have their own issues. Okay, some of these issues they accuse the prequel of that the sequel trilogy is guilty of. Because when you see the prequels, yeah, they have references to the original trilogy, but they do not shoehorn the original trilogy every 5 seconds the way the sequel trilogy does. They do not disregard the universe, the lore, or the values, or its characters. They do not lack in character development. That's another thing. That's something that the sequel trilogy did, and it is guilty of. So again, I say to the sequel fandom, if you're going to trash the prequels, you might as well get on the sequel trilogy, as it has its own host of issues. Some people accuse of the prequels, which blows my mind, because a lot of what you try to accuse the prequels of, the sequel trilogy is guilty of itself. I'll give you the perfect example. Oh, the prequels needed books to explain its own plot points, such as Garium freaking Blue. He needs to shut the fuck up. And here's why. That's wrong. He is wrong. First off, No, they don't. Okay? You need to understand that the prequel trilogy can be seen without any expanded universe material or even its novelization, and you can still understand the full context of its story. You might not know every layer or every backstory. Stuff like that can be saved for novels, but you don't need that in order to understand the story. In the new trilogy, there is a whole 30 years gap of information not explained. Because after Return of the Jedi, all of a sudden there is a new order. The First Order, and it is not fucking explained. This is a prequel trilogy before the original trilogy. They could have easily just had it to where the Droid army was already there and the shit was already happening. Well, technically the Droid army was already there, but guess what? They actually went through the effort of explaining where they came from. The Trade Federation, the Union, and the Confederacy and the Separation and the Separatists. They actually explained all of this in the movie when they didn't even have to. Another thing they do not acknowledge. The movie actually explains its logic, its world. Something they don't even acknowledge. They didn't even have to because it's a prequel. You could really just kind of kickstart that. Here, you really have to, and yet they did anyway. So here, you especially have to, because this is after Return of the Jedi, where nobody knows what the hell is going on, and why the fuck the First Order just shows up like this. It makes no sense. You did not explain it. Again, be consistent, because you can. I can't stand Plinkett. I think he's overrated. I cannot stand Plinkett. I can't stand him. However, the thing is, at least he's consistent. He does not like the sequel trilogy and the prequels, and people want to get on the prequels when it's like, look at what the fuck the sequels did. Half of what you're accusing of the prequels can be applied to the sequels. And you're going to trash those movies when the sequels did a bunch of stupid shit that you accuse the prequels of, that really the sequel trilogy is guilty of. Because, again, the prequel trilogy has its own issues and flaws. The sequel trilogy definitely has its own issues and flaws. So, in episode 3, Vader says, "No!" Now, first off, I spoke about this earlier. Remember when I talked about the fact that people claim George Lucas had clunky dialogue in A New Hope? This is before the prequels. They said that, but, they accused him of that too. But here's the funny thing. Even when they revised the script, there was still some of the corniest dialogue ever. And where? From Lawrence Kasdan in episode 5. They had corny dialogue there. Didn't they just accuse George Lucas of having clunky, corny dialogue? But if you hear Empire Strikes Back, there's corny-ass dialogue all over that movie. You see Return of the Jedi, there's corny-ass dialogue all over that movie. You see A New Hope, yes, there's corny-ass dialogue all over that movie. But they always highlight that, which pisses me off, because look at Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Corny-ass dialogue all over that movie. I'm going to highlight Empire, especially. Some of the corniest lines in cinematic history are in Empire Strikes Back, specifically that movie. The one they say is the best Star Wars movie ever. Now, I respect and love that movie. It is a brilliant film. However, it is very wrong and disingenuous to sit there and get on the prequels for its corny moments and corny dialogue when the original trilogy had it all over the place. And of course, one of the most famous lines, "No, no, that's impossible, no!" That is the corniest line in cinematic history. It is so corny. The only thing cornier than that was what Leia said to Han when she got mad at him. Really corny. "You flibbling nerf herder." And then what Han said was really corny. It was so corny. This is a cornball. And did I care? No. I love the movie anyway. That sometimes that added to it because it was just fun. It was interesting. Right. So then you have to think about the fact that the new trilogy had corny moments too. Okay, well, there are people who like this. There's some scenes in The Force Awakens that I liked, right? Some people called it over the top and corny. There's some things that I like. But overall, not the biggest fan of the story there. Some of the dialogue was decent. I'll give it that. So, yeah. The main point is this. Sequel trilogy has moments of corny-ass dialogue. The prequel trilogy has moments of corny-ass dialogue. The original trilogy has moments of corny-ass dialogue. Star Wars has moments of corny-ass dialogue. Why are you singling out one trilogy for what the entire saga is guilty of? Why? That's my point. That's the main point. And they act like the only movies that had this corny-ass dialogue was, of course, the making of Episode 4 and the prequels. Anything George Lucas had anything to say in. Really stupid when the entire saga was guilty of this the entire time. So the scene in Revenge of the Sith when he says, "No!" This is a direct correlation to Empire Strikes Back when he said, "No, that's impossible. No!" This is the exact same thing. There is literally no difference. They're both corny. It's true. Except I really like that scene of Revenge of the Sith. And I also love the scene in Empire Strikes Back. I still love both scenes for different reasons, I like those scenes. But despite that, they're still extremely corny. I'm not going to single out Revenge of the Sith when Empire did the same thing, and it is the corniest line in cinematic history. So why are you singling out Revenge of the Sith for what Empire Strikes Back did? That doesn't make any sense. It's my main point. Okay, on a weirder, stranger note, what is that about George Lucas and about the fact that, George Lucas sold Star Wars for money? He was already rich as fuck. He was a billionaire before he sold it. He was a billionaire after. So why would he give a fuck about money when he already owns so much shit? What the hell are they talking about? That makes no sense. Why would you care about money at that point, knowing that you have such an abundance of it? That's not accurate. He sold it for emotional reasons because people kept trashing the movie so much. So he wanted fans to finally just be happy already. That's why he sold it. Like, all right, he didn't want to have to deal with that no more. Wow, that's a strange one. Not only, but out of respect for him, I'm not even going to mention it. So, yeah, like he has a unique perspective. That's interesting. So, here's the thing. The attack on Geonosis. Now, why is this so important and meaningful? Because this is the first battle of the clones. So, motherfucker, I want to see it. They're like, look at all this pointless CGI everywhere. It's so pointless and meaningless. I don't know why they keep saying that. You have to show the ships, you got to show the droids, you got to show the clones, and you have to show the Jedi. So how is that pointless to then have special effects that show these things? And it was a mixture of practical and CGI, so they're wrong about that too anyway. So, yeah, why would you not show that? You have to show it in order for people to see the battle. And why is it so important? Think about when Geonosis happened. Geonosis happened when they were going after Count Dooku, and the Separatists and the clone army had just been created, and the Separatists were taking over the galaxy, and they finally pushed the Separatists back once and for all. The only way to do this was for them to fight at Geonosis. Geonosis was the pinpoint of this battle. This is where the Separatists were gathering and meeting. This is where so many important elements of the Star Wars universe, even where the Death Star plans was, but, that's what they're fighting over. They're fighting over control over the galaxy. And this battle really kickstarted, the Clone Wars fully kickstarted on Geonosis. That's when it really, really started to kickstart. Because the clone army had just been created. So there weren't, that's when they just started fighting. That's when they started fighting with the Jedi. If you don't show this battle, we don't see the beginnings or the interworkings of the Clone War and what that means when they fight the Separatists. So how are you going to have something be called Attack of the Clones and the Clone Wars, and you don't show the great battles of the Clone Wars? It makes no sense. We have to see these great battles, and they're none other than Geonosis, one of the most important battles in Star Wars history. That is the beginning of the Clone Wars. That's what kickstarts the Clone Wars. Just like when you saw the Battle of the Gungan Army and how that kickstarted the Trade Federation getting taken down, which would lead to the Clone Wars. So it's like, what? And this is before the clones. When you see a Phantom Menace, there were no clones. So the Jedi had to do things very differently and didn't have a military. Now they basically have a military. So you gotta see how that works. How are they gonna have a fucking military after spending an entire film without one, and you don't see how that works? That's why they had to contact the Gungans to have a military to fight. Now they have their own. This is really stupid. There's so many different things. You would never see what happened to the Separatists. You would never see what happened if you don't show the Battle of Geonosis. You're not going to know what's going on in the Clone Wars if you don't show the Battle of Geonosis. It is the beginning of the Clone Wars, so you can actually understand what's happening in the Clone Wars. You are not going to know if you don't see the Battle of Geonosis. So to say that Geonosis is pointless is dumb. How could you say that? Hoth was important. Hoth was essential. The rebels were losing. And you got to see that and see where they're standing in the war. One of the most important battles in Star Wars history, and it happens in the middle of the movie. It doesn't happen at the end like I expected it when I first watched it. I could have sworn it would happen at the end, but it didn't happen in the middle. So that's the thing. Crate was different. That actually happened at the end, which I actually like that. I like the fact that they moved that to the end because that's more like of an impact. I'm cool with that. But anywho, I didn't like the movie. But there's things I liked in it. But so yeah, to say that that's pointless, what about Hoth? Hoth was a meaningful battle in Star Wars. No one says that that was pointless, so why would you say Geonosis is pointless, or the Battle of the Gungans, or the Battle of Naboo Theed? What the fuck? These are important battles that you need. Saving the people that you love and a planet of starving innocent people from a political establishment that has not taken the necessary measures to help. So she has to do it. That's what leads to the Battle of Theed. You know that, right? And then, of course, the Jedi and Qui-Gon Jinn and the Gungans and everything all combined into this one huge battle. Boom. The Separatists and everything getting out of hand and taking over the galaxy until the clone army is created. And the first battle to signify this is the Battle of Geonosis. How could you not have the very most important chapter in the Clone Wars story not be there? You think the humor was forced in the prequels? Are you kidding me? What about the new trilogy? How many times have they forced the dialogue down your throat? By the way, you should laugh at this scene. This is a funny moment. Even if it doesn't even make any logical sense, such as The Last Jedi. One of the worst scenes in the entire saga I have ever seen, and it defeated the weight of the scene as well. And it interferes with the drama that they were going for. When the coins hit this dude, a guard, okay, don't you think that that is just ridiculous? I mean, I understand that there is slapstick in the saga, and I know that in Empire he didn't want gags, he wanted humor with the characters. That's fine, but guess what? They ended up having funny stuff like that in Return of the Jedi, and even in A New Hope, and they even had it in the prequels. And then they complain about it when they had stuff like this in the original trilogy. Okay, but even those movies had nothing like The Last Jedi, where they have a coin shooting at a guard, and the guard's like, "Oh no, whatever will I do?" And I guess there's nothing I can do about these coins hitting my body. One of the dumbest, most ridiculous scenes I've ever seen. Like, you're forcing humor down people's throats. And it's just, and it's written all over the movie's face. So, if you're going to get on the prequels, dude, you better point out some of the stupid shit they put in those sequels. You will hear people complain about the fact that the CGI looks too dark and real. I'll give you an example. Neil Blomkamp. What I love about his effects in particular is they look very real and dirty and realistic. Excellent, excellent. However, when I see the CGI in the prequels, they look dead ass real, but yet they look clean. They do not look gritty. They still look really good. Now, why do these special effects of the prequel trilogy look so good? Here's what I ended up learning from research. Believe it or not, it's a mixture of practical and CGI. That is why they look so real. Mixing two technological advancements into one. That's another thing. If you're going to say that they just look perfectly clean, you have to acknowledge that they use practical effects as well. And they hold up, even against most CGI movies today, which look like just bland, generic CGI to me. People think Avatar looks revolutionary. I think that looked like bland, generic CGI. I don't even see it. I look at the special effects, I'm like, I've seen that already. When I see the prequels, there's a unique artistic design, and the way that it looks incredible. And it still holds up to this day and even competes with modern films. You're going to go on and on about the fact that, people like the prequels and you don't understand it. Oh yeah? Well, people like the new trilogy and I don't understand that. So what, if you took the Star Wars title away from the prequels, it's generic sci-fi? Oh really? Well, look at what they've been doing for the past years, ever since 2017 especially. For years and years, Star Wars has been gradually becoming that generic sci-fi shit. And I warned people years ago, and I'm still warning people now, that if they continue with this track record, if they continue on this track, then what will end up happening is people will regard it as generic sci-fi. And that never happened with the prequels. People complained about the prequels, but they never saw Star Wars as some generic sci-fi stuff. Now, that is exactly what people are starting to see it as. And when did this happen? Oh, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker. That is when that started happening. And then with the Disney Plus spinoffs,
and stuff like that. So people, that's a whole nother story. I know some people like that and this and that, but yeah, that whole generic sci-fi argument, you could definitely apply that with the new movies. Again, when people get on the prequels, why don't you apply a lot of the things that the issues of Star Wars to the new trilogy? How come you only apply the issues in the Star Wars universe to the prequels, but you do not apply this to the new trilogy? Think about it. The new trilogy is guilty of so many of these things of generic sci-fi, the new trilogy, and many other things. The new trilogy is guilty of these things, and yet you do not apply that there, but you apply it to the prequels. That is hypocritical, considering what the new trilogy did is totally different from what the prequels did. At its worst, people just thought they were bad movies. Dude, even at its least, people think that the new trilogy is disrespectful to Star Wars and does not understand it or care to even uphold it. That's something you can't even apply to the prequels. Because even if you want to take Red Letter Media into account, guess what? People were still reading the comics, buying the toys, and loving Star Wars. You do not see that here with the new trilogy era. This is not the same. So again, when you're going to get on the new trilogy, you better, oh my God, if you're going to get on the prequel era trilogy, you better talk about the fucking issues of the new trilogy, because that is so hypocritical. Oh, they're just some mediocre sci-fi films with some cool action scenes. What about The Force Awakens? What is the one thing that draws me to the movie? Well, the fun and action, but that's really about it. So I end up watching the prequels and the original trilogy again. Why is that? One redeeming quality in terms of quality thing about The Force Awakens is the fun and action, or two things. So because of that, you don't get any substance, you don't get any subtlety, and you don't get any nuance. But you want to claim that the movies that actually had moments of subtlety, moments of nuance, had these things in there. Oh, that's the generic sci-fi. But the thing that had no subtlety, the thing that had no substance, that's the thing that's that's the thing that you won't get on. And it's bullshit, because it's like you just stated that that's real generic sci-fi right there. I mean, oh my God. So I could apply that to The Force Awakens. I'm pretty sure the sequel fans wouldn't like that. So why would you apply it to the prequel trilogy just because you don't like it? The same logic you just applied to the prequels, how come you never apply that to the new trilogy? The trilogy that actually invalidated the originals, while the prequels expanded on those things, and it does not invalidate the previous films or contradict what happened in those movies, as Plinkett has claimed, but that is not true. Literally, if you do your research on the lore and information behind the prequels, excluding even the expanded universe, just seeing the prequel movies, he is literally wrong. However, that's another conversation. So, the movies that actually invalidated the original trilogy, blatantly, even telling you, the fans, to disregard all of those things yourself, let the fucking past die, kill it if you have to, that's the movie you're going to defend. You're going to sit there and talk about how, when I see the new trilogy, when I see the original trilogy, I can't get these movies out of my head. The fact that the prequels have to be associated with the purity of the original trilogy. Well, you know something? When I see the original trilogy, now I have to think about the fact that after this happens, guess how much of this gets invalidated by the new trilogy? That's something I didn't have to think about before the movies even came out. Back in 2015, when I was just looking at the prequels, and the only thing that was coming out was The Force Awakens. All we had was the 6 films, so I didn't have to think like that. And even with just The Force Awakens, it's like, okay, they've already invalidated so many things, but hey, at least this was kind of fun, I guess. Once you get to The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, consider it completely invalidated. But especially, it all began with The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens was already invalidating stuff. So the things that invalidate the original trilogy legitimately and fully, openly and completely, you're going to, those movies, you're not going to have that strange moment when you sit down with the original trilogy and think, oh my God, why does this have to be in the same saga? What are you talking about? You're talking about the prequels that did not invalidate the previous movies in entry or in chronological order. But these literally invalidate them right there. And you don't have that same conversation in your head when you think about the new trilogy. So here's what gets me mad about prequel haters. They tend to have an interesting bias. A bias towards the new movies, which is annoying because those movies actually portray the lore and values. You claim that the prequel era did not respect the lightsaber in Force, but they literally have scenes in the movie showing you how much they appreciate and respect these things. Things that you will never see in the new trilogy. So what you accused of the prequels was false, but then the actual movies that do shit like this, you disregard that and don't even pay attention to it. Defending the new movies, claiming, oh, these are not that bad. You know what I think? I feel like you just have a bias towards these movies for whatever the reason might be. Some people are like, well, it's not as bad as the prequels. Some people are like, hey, these aren't half bad. And some people just like it. And some people like just Star Wars in general. And I could appreciate and respect that. But here's the thing. I do not appreciate and respect you shitting on the prequels, but then when the sequels fucks up, you want to just sweep that shit under the rug. That's fucking bullshit. Drives me crazy is the fact that now every single time I see the original trilogy, I have to also remember the fact that these new movies are now in the same chronological order, even though they invalidate these films, which makes no sense that they're even in the same order. Sure, what Anomaly Inc. was saying. He claims that the argument of them being held up doesn't make sense. I don't remember him saying that they're being held up by the original trilogy. I remember him saying that it was annoying to see that the prequels are a part of that same timeline. So my response to that is, are you kidding me? Look at the new trilogy. Now every single time you see the original trilogy, you have to wonder, oh, great, that gets invalidated. And oh, great, this happens. Oh, there goes Luke. That's the biggest thing. When I go back to see Return of the Jedi, I have to think about the fact that way later, that's what Luke is going to turn into. And it makes no sense with his character, and it just doesn't make sense. You want to tackle moral grayness, have it match the character. The character has to already be morally gray, or do something like that to signify that it's in their character to do so, especially if it's an innocent person that hasn't done anything yet. That's the most extreme form, even if you were to go that far. It's just ridiculous. These are things I did not have to think about with the prequels. Now I have to think about it with these new movies. Because when you see the prequels, you could take what Red Letter Media says into account. But you don't have to worry about invalidation or contradictions or even lack of character development. But that's another story. You don't have to worry about stuff like that. You don't have to think about that. But now you actually do. So when he sits there and says, oh my God, I can't believe that they're in the same timeline and everything like that. When he sits there and says that, I'm like, how do you not say that with these new movies? You could easily apply that same logic with these new films. People don't realize just how deep this goes. This goes back 20 years in the making. The original trilogy purists, they were the first people to trash the prequels before the heyday of the internet and YouTube. When they started trashing the prequels on forums, people started adapting this. And then in the early days of YouTube, people like Plinkett showed up and then took this to the next level. These are a bunch of original trilogy purists who were really pissed off because of the fact that it did not match their vision of what they thought a continuation of the original trilogy would be like, regardless of whether it was a prequel or not. They wanted to see the same, well, something a lot like the original trilogy, basically. And me, I argue that the prequels is done in that style. It's just they did something different with it, but they have a whole thing. If you go on YouTube, you'll see alternative stories of how the could have been, and they would even use planets from the original trilogy, such as Alderaan, which is not a shock, considering the fact that when you see the prequels, they did not go there. Instead, they decided to just use new planets and totally new situations, which I totally prefer. That's what I was hoping Disney would do. Something you don't have to do it the way the prequels did. You could do it your own way, but just do it new, a new way, with new planets, new places, new everything. So even if you take what they say into account, you could have at least done something new with it. But then you have to go back in time. Back when the prequels were first being hated on. And who were they being hated on by? They were being hated on by original trilogy purists who just wanted their viewpoint of what they thought the continuation of the original trilogy should be like. Because it didn't match with what they thought the original trilogy should be like, they hated it. This is one of the number one reasons they hate it. And this is also another reason why they really need to reassess what they keep saying. Because they keep saying the same thing. Bad CGI, bad acting, and Jar Jar Binks. Okay, elaborate on that. And of course, they will do the same thing. So that's what they really, gotta elaborate on. It's annoying. I can't stand sequel fans, the way they act towards the prequels. I can't stand sequel fans, how they defend Disney. Oh, Disney's a company, they're just trying to make money. Who cares? Really stupid. Who gets mad over a fictional universe? They can suck my dick. That's bullshit. It's not just a fictional universe. It's Star Wars. Show it some respect. They need to understand how much that matters and means. It impacts whole societies. It's not just, oh, it's just a fictional universe. Okay, I can say that about Marvel. No one wants to hear that shit when they're thinking about the inspiration of creative visions. They don't want to. You can't. You be in the middle of DC. Well, it's just a fictional universe. So that's who does that. They wait until someone's critiquing it to then all of a sudden say that shit. Like, ooh, no one can critique my precious baby. But you sat there and shat on the prequels for 20 years straight and said the same shit about it at this point. So it's ridiculous. Here's the real thing. The prequels do not invalidate the original trilogy. Now, Plinkett has claimed this horse shit, but it's so wrong and inaccurate because when you see the scenes, they don't actually invalidate the previous movies. When you see the new trilogy, they actually invalidate the previous 6 films, not just the original trilogy, but they also invalidate the prequels as well. They invalidate the entire saga, just like that. Just like that. That's a big fucking deal. That means you're not regarding the canon or the world or universe that you claimed you were going to uphold, and you're not even regarding it. So yeah, they invalidate it completely. And yet, people want to complain about the prequels and claim that, oh, those invalidated the original trilogy. That's bullshit. They have to elaborate on that. And when they try to, I'll give you an example. Plinkett claimed that the lightsaber was disregarded and not respected or upholded, but they literally have scenes in the movie where they do respect and uphold the lightsaber and talk about its importance. In the new trilogy, they have nothing like this, and they invalidate the previous films as well. So what are they talking about? It's frustrating to hear such things in the Star Wars community. This is annoying. Okay, the special editions. Now, I grew up with them, and I had no issue with them. I grew up with it. You know, the changes that they made to certain songs, I ended up going back to the original years later and realizing that, to be honest, I preferred some of the special edition changes, shockingly, because some of the originals, I just thought the special did better. Specifically, some of the songs, some of the effects, Bespin, Cloud City, I preferred the special edition. Lightsabers look amazing. However, there's something about the realistic look of the originals, I'm not going to lie there. So, I eventually found something called the Despecialized Edition. Now, I was looking for the other special edition. There's another special fan-made edition. I'm not sure what it's called, I forgot. But this was to capture the original footage and film of the vinyl and tape releases, the original theatrical release of the movie, not the one that George Lucas altered. So this was amazing. I looked for it, and could never find it, could never download it. However, I was able to watch the Despecialized edition, which is basically something very similar, where they kind of digitally got rid of all the special edition changes, recaptured the original footage and stuff like that. But it's just not as high quality, and it's a little different because that one is the ultimate one that I've been searching for, and I love this. I've seen the Despecialized edition. It looks amazing. They have Despecialized edition for the entire original trilogy. If you go on Stremio, you can find it. It's really good. It is so beautiful. It looks amazing. I love it. However, that doesn't suddenly mean that I have an issue with the special edition. When I go back to the special edition, there's things about that I actually prefer even over the Despecialized edition, even over the original. You know, such as Cloud City. It looks way better. And I do mean way better in the special edition. It looks amazing. And yeah, so the special edition has a couple of things in there. Do I care? No. And also, most people talk about just 2 or 3 things. I don't like the lightsabers. I don't like this one scene. I don't like this one shot. That is it. You got on an entire special edition over like 3 things. That's it. Now, yeah, I guess it kind of sucks that they made the other original unavailable. Yeah, I don't understand that. You know, they should just be available so then people can switch between whichever one they want to see. You know, however, I don't care. I grew up with it, and it's not that serious. Like, I've seen it numerous times, and it's pretty damn like good. It still looks good. I still got to see it. It's pretty alright. So I feel like they blew that out of proportion. And guess what? They keep blowing out of proportion. When they mention the fact that there's something wrong with the special editions, the number one thing they point to is one scene. That's right, one mistake, where he put CGI in front of the camera. Okay, he made one mistake. One. They blew shit out of proportion for an entire film, which special editions have been playing on Spike TV for years. And me and my friends saw that shit. We didn't even care. No one cared. We just wanted to see Star Wars. Now, all of a sudden, years later, that's a thing. Yeah, from original trilogy purists, then it's a thing. And it's bullshit because, and then it's not even that many changes, it's like a few in comparison to the original. And then there's one shot. You don't even mention most of the issues of the special edition. You just mention like 2 or 3 things. And the number one thing you mention the most is just one thing. And what is that thing? The shot in Tatooine. When you separate that one shot, what about the rest of the movie? So it's really dumb. Then I found this despecialized and I loved it. And I still watched the special edition after and did not care. And still enjoyed it and loved it. And yes, I do have a huge soft spot for the original because it looks amazing. However, when it comes to like certain things like the music or certain effects or Cloud City, dude, I crave the special edition because I want to see that version because I really like those versions. So there's things that about the special edition I prefer over the original, and then there's things I love about the original. That's why I like seeing this despecialized edition. It's really cool. But again, I don't see the big deal because I grew up with the special edition and I never saw it as a big deal. And now they're making it a big deal, and they only have like 3 things to say about it, and they keep repeating one, which is the Tatooine shot. And one mistake does not invalidate an entire film. So, when it comes down to Kathleen Kennedy, notice the difference of George Lucas and how he tackled criticism and allowed actors to openly criticize, unlike Kathleen Kennedy, who tries to silence them, like she tried to do with Mark Hamill with his Twitter retorts and everything. That's bullshit. Because when George Lucas was in charge, Ewan McGregor famously disliked the special edition and had issues with it and openly spoke about it, and George Lucas didn't silence him when he was in charge. If you don't like the prequels, that's fine. To shit all over them, I'm going to say something about it. I'm going to critique it, and I'm going to critique the new movies especially. So I'm going to critique it, and if people want to get on what I say, I should be able to get on what they're saying too, because they trash me and say, you're a cancer to the internet. Oh, because I'm harsh and critique Star Wars and the state that it's in. Wow. So it's just like, they get to say whatever they want about the prequels and trash the fuck out of it. But then when I say something, it's a problem. Okay, that's fair, I guess. Except it's not. It's bullshit, hypocritical, and biased. But just, who's keeping tabs? And if you don't like the prequels, that's fine. I could totally understand that. But I'm still going to critique what you're saying about those movies and critique you for even getting on it in the first place. And especially people who get on the prequels but then talk about how great the new movies are. I'm going to get on those people especially too, definitely. So, yeah. You just sat down in a whole video and you were like, it's been 16 years since Star Wars has come out. And you finally get to see a new Star Wars movie, and the very first thing you see in the title crawl is politics. So you just sat here and claimed that there was something wrong with these movies. And you're telling me that the very first issue you had with the movies was the fact that, oh no, in a title card, I'm reading about politics in Star Wars. That's not a flaw. That's just something you might not be interested in. That's not an actual flaw with the story. In other words, I don't want my stories to have too much action. I want them to have more dialogue. Well, I don't want that story to have too much dialogue. I want more action. Well, that sucks. Wait a minute. That's not a flaw. A flaw is that there's something wrong with the dialogue or something wrong with the way that the action was filmed. A flaw is not the fact that they decided to put politics in a title crawl. You don't understand it. Okay. Well, why don't you just say that? Why are you saying that it's a flaw? You're literally coming across the film and you're basically saying, oh, well, I don't, it's just confusing. Like, what does this mean? Yada, yada, yada. So many people have already said that exact same thing. You're literally just saying the same thing that most people who hop on the Plinkett Red Letter Media bandwagon say. You're not breaking down the fundamental flaws of what's wrong with the movie. You're basically pointing out a subject in the film, the subject of politics. So you don't want politics in Star Wars, or you don't like the fact that it's even there. Plus, I noticed something interesting. When you read the title call, you didn't even know. There's a Trade Federation blockade across the planet of Naboo. 2 Jedi are sent to quell the issue. The rest ensues. That's what's actually going on. It's also explaining what's happening in the galaxy and world at that point in time. Since the last time you even saw what the hell was going on in that universe was 16 years prior, as you stated. I noticed you didn't necessarily understand what you read there. Pointing out the same thing. What did Anomaly Inc. say? Why does politics equal bad? The issue is that you did not break down a fundamental flaw of the movie's story, the characters. What's wrong with that story? What's wrong with what's... You just said, oh, there's some politics everywhere. Oh, no. And then you are basically putting that up as if it's a flaw. That's not a flaw. That's just a subject matter in the movie. Something you can use for the story. That's not a flaw. You got to bring up an actual flaw with the story, dude. You can't just say, oh, well, they put this in this movie. And since it's in this movie, it's flawed. But why is it flawed? Just because they put something like politics in a movie doesn't just automatically make it flawed. It just might mean that you aren't interested in politics. Funny how Anomaly Inc. says that. He says there's this little thing called reading, dipshit. So, he's going in. So here's the thing. All you had to do was read it. That's it. You could have just read the entire title crawl. That way you are informed as to what is going on. Unlike the new trilogy, where you barely know shit even when you read the title crawl. It doesn't give you enough information. It just brushes past stuff, skips everything, and you don't know what's going on. But you got on the thing that tried to explain it, and now you're saying, oh, well, that's boring because there's politics in it. Huh? If you read it, you'd actually know the story behind it. You'll be informed when you're watching the movie. Said it's anticlimactic as well, which is strange to apply to the very beginning of a movie during a title call. Usually, if you're going to talk about something being anticlimactic, it would be a conclusion of the story or the conclusion of the story. You can't just say it's flawed just because you don't like what you're reading. Oh, it's politics, so that's boring. Okay, just say it's boring for you. So you're bored. Okay. So that's your issue, the fact that it's boring? Okay, that's really an opinion. You didn't dive into what's fundamentally wrong with that. You just said that it was boring. Okay, that's it? Okay, well, the title crawl is uninformative in the new trilogy. How about that? You basically brushed past so much storytelling, so much information, and just started with the title crawl, and you were just like, yeah, and I don't understand it, and it's boring. And this is why, this is part of why the new trilogy is so booty. This is a very weak and stale argument. This is not enough. You didn't fundamentally break anything down. You didn't use any reasoning or logic, or you didn't break down the fundamentals. I mean, this is really weak. You need to dive into the intellectual point as to what's wrong with the movies. You want to get on the prequels, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I will debate you. I will critique you till the end of time. However, you are still, you have a right to your opinion and perspective. But dude, if you're going to trash those movies like every fucking body else does, you better know what the fuck you're talking about. Anomaly Inc. pointed out that first off, the beginning of the stories are the beginning. You're talking about the very beginning, before the shots have even been shown. This is just the title call, and you already denounced the entirety of the trilogy based off of the very beginning of the title call. It's just the beginning of the movie, genius. So don't you realize that there's a whole movie to watch too? You didn't even get to that point. So how are you going to brush it off already in the very beginning? Look at Anomaly Inc. What is it that you notice? He pointed out something that was important, but here's something I noticed. That's the reason why he was able to point that out, is because this person is not reading the title crawl. Anomaly Inc. pointed out Army of the Republic. Yeah, information about what's going on. This is what I was mentioning before. It informs you about what's happening in the title crawl. Unlike the new trilogy, which gives you very minimal information. That's what I'm basically saying. It does not inform you. So, yeah. I've seen movies that are meant for kids, rated G, rated PG, with politics, and they were meant for kids. Even the movie Secret of Nim had politics, and it was meant for kids. Many movies have deep, informative messages like WALL-E, and they are meant for kids. You will see movies that have adult themes like Incredibles, deep themes, and guess what? They are meant for kids, so it doesn't matter. Age doesn't matter. Even if it's directed towards a childlike audience, it can still be intelligent or thought-provoking. It can still convey messages, so it doesn't matter. It just doesn't. Pay attention to another statement he says in the very beginning of his video. He says, "What is a trade blockade thingy, and why are Jedi talking about it? They have to talk about the blockade because there's a blockade on a planet, and they are the ones sent to quell the issue. If Jedis are the upholders of the peace, and there's a blockade on an innocent planet full of innocent people, why would they not talk about something like that? Like, when you talk about flaws in the movie, please know what the hell you're talking about. I believe they explain this in the movie if you actually paid attention. The whole idea of how come there's no proof of what the Trade Federation is doing, even though two Jedi have already seen it. I believe they already explained this in the movie, and especially people's viewpoint on the Jedi at that point. So, certain things that people do bring up, they actually do explain in the movie. However, I do commend you for actually bringing up an actual flaw, an issue with the plot and story. Plus, even if you were to take that flaw into account, that doesn't really defeat the movie. It's one flaw. Very different from the common complaints that you would hear from what people say. So I'll give you that. First off, you can have mature shows that are kid shows. It doesn't matter. You can have a mature cartoon for adults. You can have a movie or TV show for all ages. It doesn't matter. All that matters is the creative vision behind what you're doing. He claims that it's for kids. People of all ages watch Star Wars. It doesn't even matter. What matters is what you put into it. So if you put some, when I was a kid, I kept watching all of those scenes. I didn't care. I didn't care if there was politics. I didn't care if there was this, that. I just cared if I was interested in what I was seeing. That's all I cared about. Is this interesting? Oh, ah. And I just kept looking at it and watching it like, whoa, what's going on here? Couldn't believe it. I did not care. So the fact that people are bringing this up as if it's an issue is shocking because it's, and then bringing up, oh, it's for kids. Well, why would kids care about politics? Why is there mature media, regardless of age, that has things like politics or violence or death? And then kids watch it too. It doesn't matter. What matters is the creative vision, not the age demographic. Who cares? Even if the age demographic is aiming towards one, it might reach out to another. So why does that even fucking matter? Who cares? Again, the creative vision is what matters, not what you're talking about. That doesn't matter. George Lucas spoke out about this. And who cares? Like, why does it matter? It just doesn't. It's not even important. So he says that George Lucas says he wants a society, or he thinks it would be interesting to see a society become more mature, more rational, more knowledge-based. Interesting. So, look, he already has a viewpoint about how he thinks society should go. Maybe that's why he makes his movies the way he makes them, regardless of the fact that the demographic is for kids. He'll still put some interesting things in there that you wouldn't expect from something like that. And yeah, maybe that's because he's thinking about the knowledge, thinking about, other things than just what you're thinking about. Then he says, I'd like to see education play a role in our daily lives. Okay, so that's interesting. All right, so these are the viewpoints George Lucas has. He wasn't thinking about a specific demographic when he thought about that. Just because he says it's for kids doesn't mean it's only aimed towards one specific demographic. It could reach out to anyone. And Star Wars is for everyone. Interesting how Anomaly Inc. brings up that George Lucas has a respect for the child's mind. He does. Because when I was a child and I saw the prequels, I was just watching the entire thing over and over and over. And I sat there. I had the Revenge of the Sith on bootleg because I remember seeing a Phantom Menace. I could have sworn this is a Mandela effect. It was on vinyl. Dad had the original trilogy and a Phantom Menace on vinyl, or maybe he only had a Phantom Menace on vinyl, but he still had it on vinyl. I know that for a fact. He had a Phantom Menace on vinyl in the original trilogy. Apparently, he claims now that it was only on Laserdisc, I think. Oh, sorry, Laserdisc. That's what I meant. Yeah, Laserdisc. So he had it on Laserdisc. I think he claimed he didn't have the others, or maybe he only had a Phantom Menace, and I think it got stuck in the Laserdisc player. So maybe that's not a Mandela effect. I don't know. But if he claims that it wasn't on Laserdisc, a Phantom Menace, that's weird. And I could have sworn it was all three movies. That's another thing, or two at least. But So then eventually, I saw Phantom Menace on Laserdisc, and I just kept watching it. I kept looking at it when they played it. Before that, I had seen the original trilogy first on Laserdisc. Oh my god, it changed my life. Seeing the original trilogy and seeing the prequels was a big part of my childhood. It was huge, huge. And here goes the biggest part. Then I saw Attack of the Clones by myself on DVD in the room, in my parents' room, my mom's room. Well, I think it's my parents' room, and then That's when I also saw Snow White. These are some crazy times, and I fully understood Attack of the Clones. I understood the movie. That's the crazy part, and watched everything. So yeah, I understood the movie, and I was watching the movie. And then here goes my the Revenge of the Sith experience. In the year 2005, Revenge of the Sith had came out in theaters, and so did Star Wars Battlefront 2. And I would later get Star Wars Battlefront 1, and also Revenge of the Sith. My parents got it on Laserdisc at Briar Lake Village. I would sit there watching Revenge of the Sith on repeat. If you thought I loved the original trilogy, if you thought I loved episodes 1 and 2, you hadn't seen shit. When I saw episode 3, I just kept watching it over and over and over and over and playing it over and over and over. And dude, it was on fucking bootleg. I was still playing that shit. There were scenes that weren't even finished. I didn't give a fuck. I loved it that much. I was watching it over and over. Then I was playing the game. And then I was watching the movie. And then I was playing the fucking game. And then I was playing Battlefront. And then I went back to watch Star Wars Episode 3. Back to back to fucking back. It was that good. And I was a kid. And yeah, I understood the fucking movie. Yeah, man. Dude, I understood Superman Returns as a child. And I still didn't like it. I still fundamentally agreed with my assessment back then. I had issues with it back then. Then I saw Superman 1 and 2, the Richard Donner, and had huge issues with Returns still to this day. And I still love Man of Steel. So yeah, I was critically assessing things at age 4. That's when I started critically assessing things, around 4, between age 4 and 7. That's when I started critically assessing films. I've been assessing them for years. So to say that George Lucas had an appreciation for the child's mind is a problem is ridiculous. Maybe he does respect the mind of a child, because when I was a kid, this is what I went through with Star Wars. That's thanks to George Lucas. And I mentioned the fact that Pixar has some very mature and deep themes for a movie that's aimed towards children. So it doesn't matter that a movie like the Prequels, which is aimed towards children, has these deeper and mature themes. And plus, since grown adults watch these movies anyway, really the way I see it is that it's aimed towards everyone. However, if you want to take what they're saying into account, it doesn't even matter, because you'll have Pixar movies that have these deeper themes, and that's aimed towards kids. So why does it matter that he put politics in the movies that were also aimed towards kids? Why does that even matter? That leads me to my next point. It's not just for kids, it's for everybody. Everybody watches it. The majority of people that you're going to be hearing about watching Star Wars are a bunch of grown-ass men. So that's not even accurate anyway. And if a bunch of grown-ass men then are going to see it, then it would make sense that you put politics in it. But even if you want to take the kids' demographic into account, Pixar puts mature and deeper themes in their movies, and those are aimed towards kids. So why does it matter that he puts politics in the movies? It doesn't matter. As my favorite aesthetic and artistic design and everything and world is the prequel era world and universe. I prefer that over pretty much everything in Star Wars, so that's a big deal. And my favorite thing in Star Wars are the clones. And the original design is masterfully done. It's excellent. It is literally flawless and impeccable. I love it. So yeah, it's just one of my favorite things about the clones is actually the Clone Wars design and the Republic Commando design of the clones. I just love the way that they did that. When I play Battlefront, they have that same design. The first Battlefront 2 has the more updated design that you saw in the films, but Battlefront 1 has that classic design of the clones that you saw in the early Clone Wars. That might be why I like it so much. So they still got it from the movies. That comes from Attack of the Clones. That's the best design. That's my favorite, you know. But I love how they modified this design in the Clone Wars show. It's really good. I love that. And in Republic Commando, oh my, I love that especially. So yeah. Okay. So again, you're bringing up some points here. Now, you claimed that it's a very overly common argument, but you still laid it down anyway, about the CGI. Your issue is the fact that when it's Star Wars and the original trilogy were practical effects, I had to stop you right there. First off, this is a modern film from the early 2000s when CGI had just become the norm. So why are you automatically expecting them to go against the norm, new technology, and go back to the old technology just because that's what you would have preferred? That's so biased and unfair because you're judging the movie off of unfair merits based off of the fact that it should have done what the originals did when this is a new movie in the year 2000. How dare you? And then he had the audacity to say something flawed. Again, you better stay on the point. Oh my God. You claim that the CGI doesn't add to the story? Dude, the droids on Geonosis are fighting the clones. You need special effects to show what happened on the Battle of Geonosis so that what's going on between the CIS and the Republic comes to a huge battle. How are you going to understand and know this battle without the special effects and technology and budget to show the battle? What the hell is wrong with you? How many times have I heard this stupid shit? How many times have I heard this inaccurate, stupid shit? If you're going to get on the prequels, know what the hell you're talking about. You need to show the droids. You need to show the clones. Without the special effects, what are you going to do? Hire 100,000 different people to play the clones and then have a bunch of practical effects set to the thousands on film? What the hell is this? Dude, the money would be insane, but not just the money, the amount of actors you would need, the amount of people. That's ridiculously unreasonable and insane. And you could do a miniature set, but how would you move them? They won't move like real soldiers. So they would just be standing looking cool, but they wouldn't do anything. So you still run into an issue. So they had to use CGI to tell this story, dude. It was the only way to actually tell it. And you're getting on it, claiming it didn't add to the story when it literally shows you the story. The Battle of Geonosis is one of the most important battles in the Star Wars universe. And they literally show you why in the battle. They show you the scenes. They show you the issues, the problems, and all that. And it's in literally the battle itself. And without that battle, what the hell? How is this called Attack of the Clones? And you don't show the clones fighting. This is ridiculous. They're finally showing the clones fighting, and you're complaining because they use CGI instead of practical to show it, when it would have been virtually impossible to even have that much practical and actors to even show it. Really stupid. Then you said something so ridiculous, it doesn't add to the story. So the Battle of Geonosis doesn't add to the story? So if it was practical, it would suddenly add to the story, but because it's CGI, it doesn't? What? That's stupid. That's just a preference. I have a preference. My preference is practical. I love practical, but here's the thing. That CGI is some of the best I have ever seen in my life. So there's something special about it, but also I have a bias towards practical, but I'm not going to get on a movie that used CGI just because of that. No. Now, there are movies I don't like their CGI, but that's a whole nother story. So here's the thing. You have a bias towards practical. Don't have a bias towards practical and then say that when they add CGI, it doesn't add to the story. No, you just have a bias towards practical. Stay consistent. They do add to the story because let's say you want to show a war, right? I need the right practical or special effects to show this war. So how do the special effects not add to the story if it's showing you a part of the story? What the fuck is that? See, when you listen to this recording, do you see why I get so up in arms? Do you see why I keep talking about this shit? This is what the fuck they're saying about these movies. What the fuck is this? And then they want to put up the sequels. What the fuck? Get the hell out of here. This is bullshit. Oh my god. It's a deep pet peeve I have with the prequel criticisms. The special effects don't add to the story. That makes me sick to my stomach. The fact that they even say such a thing. What the fuck is wrong with these people? How are you? Imagine Order 66 without the special effects. Then you don't see Order 66. You just see a dude walking around not knowing. This is stupid. You wouldn't say that about the original trilogy. Has anyone ever seen pre-edit A New Hope? Plinkett made fun of it and said it was a cinematic disaster until it was quote-unquote saved by editing. Oh, gee. I wonder what that editing was. Could it be the special effects? Also, that other argument is bullshit too. Hear what George Lucas says. This is none other true than with Neil Blomkamp. Now, he says that with the advancements of technology and sculpting and things, there's a difference between making a book and making a movie. With the advancements of technology, the story becomes more clear and you can tell the story. This is very true. And this is none other more true than with someone, a cinematic visionary that I look up to, known as Neil Blomkamp. When he created District 9 and Elysium and Chappie, these masterfully told films, especially District 9 and Elysium, as I have not been graced with the blessing of seeing the movie Chappie. I've always wanted to see it. Very interested in that film. So the thing is, he used special effects. He did not just use practical. A lot of that is CGI. People don't realize it because it looks so real because of the way he handles lighting. As a director, he has a certain cinematic style. So his movies always look very realistic but gritty. and just real. There's a sense of grit and weight to the special effects, which adds to the story and meaning and weight, big time. And well, to well, with this going on with Neil Blomkamp's films, it shows you that the storytelling medium can become more clear with advanced technology. So why are you afraid of that? Now, yes, I've seen many movies with terrible CGI, but you got to get through the bad CGI to get to the good CGI anyway. However, there are movies like the early 2000s Star Wars films that have incredible CGI, or the early 2000s Spider-Man films that have incredible CGI, or the Blade movie that has incredible special effects, or the first Matrix movie. 1999, some of the best special effects ever made in the history of cinema are in these movies, especially Spider-Man, especially The Matrix. Oh my God, The Matrix special effects are groundbreaking. And yet, that's so much CGI. A lot of that is CGI. And yet you claim that it's just all practical this, practical that. This is coming from a practical fanboy. I am a practical fanboy here to tell you that there's nothing wrong with the advancements of technology. That when George Lucas talks about the advancements of technology, telling stories more clearly, he has a point with that. Now, Anomaly Inc. pointed out what I was just talking about. He claims that he likes visual storytelling. Maybe he was trying to show the Galactic War. This is something I was saying. You see, maybe you have to show the actual fucking war, and in order to show the actual war, you have to actually have the technology to show it, because if you just use practical effects, you might not have enough money or actors to show something like that. So why is that automatically a bad thing? You did not intellectually break that down. That doesn't make any sense. That criticism makes no sense. You need to take into account that George Lucas pioneered that technology. He literally pioneered it. And it was some of the first time they ever used that technology as well. Something you don't even acknowledge. That should win awards for being some of the most groundbreaking technology ever put to film, because they never had movies with special effects like that. And yet they're some of the best special effects I have ever seen. I have seen tons of movies with special effects that are just alright, or average, or just overrated, or just not even all that. But that movie has some of the best special effects I have ever seen, and they hold up like fine wine in comparison to tons of movies that just have special effects that just whatever. Not even acknowledged. And he pioneered the technology. Anomaly Inc. brought up a brilliant point that people will sit there and praise the new Ryan Johnson and the new trilogy for taking Star Wars in such a bold direction. But then here's what I'm saying before I've even seen Anomaly Inc. But when George Lucas takes a series in a bold new direction, they trash it and say, oh, that's CGI. But you have to have advanced technology in order to progress something like with it's new technology. That's never been done in a film before, let alone in a Star Wars movie. So that's incredible. Never like that, when most of it is CGI, special effects, but yet it still looks dead ass real and it immerses you into the world. That's amazing. And they also use practical effects too, is something they don't even acknowledge as well. So that's interesting. Bold new technology never before seen in a movie, let alone in a Star Wars movie, or at least never done in that way, versus bold new direction from Ryan Johnson. So you're going to praise Ryan Johnson for taking things in a bold new direction, but then get on George Lucas over some CGI. Not regarding what he did with his story and characters. He took those into bold directions too, in ways that you never will see in the new trilogy. In one of the greatest scenes probably in Star Wars history, the scene in the bar. It's a great scene. But here's the thing. You didn't point out the greatness of the scene. You pointed out the special effects and practical effects. Wow. So you did not pay attention to that scene whatsoever. You claimed that the only reason it even immersed you was just because of the fact that, oh, it was practical. Who cares? I didn't even tell the difference because he blended them in so well. I couldn't tell. It all looks so real. That's just how I see it. When you find out that it's practical, it's like, oh, that's really cool. I'm a sucker for practical effects. However, if the CGI is done right, I am a sucker for that too, when it's actually done right. Now, there's very few movies. Again, Neil Blomkamp, George Lucas, the Spider-Man films, the Matrix movies. There's quite a few, actually. And and then there's quite a few that just don't do it so well. And these don't really get talked about, but then they talk about the prequels, which did it extremely well. It was their first time. It was experimental technology, and they still pushed it that far, not regarded. You misunderstood. You didn't even break down what made the bar scene so incredible. only breaking down the fact that what made it so great was the practical effects. Basically telling people that the only way for a scene to work is for the effects. What about the actual story and characters? What the hell? It's not just the effects, it's the actual story. By the way, that was the first time they had done things like that too. Now that's the norm. Now a lot of things are mostly green screen and CGI. Now it's the norm. The same thing you got on George Lucas for doing with Star Wars is now the norm across the board with most movies. So again, I really that makes him a pioneer because he was one of the first people to do such a thing with a movie, to where it's mostly just special effects, mostly. Where even though he mixed practical and special, but still, so they don't regard that, of course. But the thing about it is, now that is the norm for films ever since those movies released. That's revolutionary. Something again that is not regarded by, of course, prequel haters and of course the sequel fandom. This is why we don't get along. Excellent point. The guy who directed the Bourne films revolutionized shaky cam. Now, what is shaky cam? Shaky cam is a special technique, and it's an incredible special technique where you inhibit a sense of anxiety or tension in a situation. It really grounds you into the experience. And this effect has been completely used across the board from TV shows, movies, and I haven't really seen it done in a cartoon. I just haven't. It might have a few times, but it's very rare. However, that would be interesting to see that in a cartoon. I've always wanted to do it. But I actually know how. You have to move the entirety of your canvas. You click it and you move it to the left, and on the next frame you kind of move to the right, and you kind of move it a little bit. So for those particular scenes that you just started animating, they'll all be shaky cam. Just a fun fact. So here's the thing. You could also do that on Flipnote very easily on Flipnote. It's a lot easier. So the thing is, here's the thing. So they revolutionized something and introduced a new cinematic technique that people still use to this day. Many shows use this technique. And it was the beginning of that technique. They call him the pioneer when it comes to shaky cam. However, George Lucas revolutionizes technology in CGI, pioneers it, and is one of the first people, if not the first, to actually put that across a big screen in a huge, big budget film. And it's an indie film, technically, since he wasn't really all over, he was kind of out of Hollywood a little bit. I mean, he's in Hollywood, but it's still technically an indie movie. It was independently made. So the thing is, when he did that, when he made the independently made film, when he did that, he pioneered something. And that right there. So just like how that person pioneered shaky cam, George Lucas basically pioneered some of the first CGI ever really, some of the most revolutionary CGI ever put to film, making it a staple and a household name for movies in general. The same thing they accused George Lucas of is the thing that new Hollywood is actually doing now, obsessing over CGI to the highest level, and without actually providing it with the necessary. They just spam it really. So it's interesting because Anomaly Inc. brought that up and claimed that it didn't have the necessary depth that CGI had in the prequels, and it's unfair that Shaky Cam, the guy who directed the Bourne trilogy, he gets praised for it, but then George Lucas gets condemned for his CGI. Special effects that even ILM had to invent, as Anomaly Inc. put it. Now he brought up a great point because that relates to a point I brought up, where they spam CGI obsessively in the industry now. Now that it is a household name, thanks to George Lucas, he's the one that pioneered that technology, and he pioneers it, but then he gets condemned for it. But then they're spamming it for real, the same way they accuse George Lucas of, and then they get praised, he gets condemned. It's so ridiculous. And guess what? I never realized this, but Jumper was actually Hayden Christensen. So yeah, and he was so different in that role from how he was in Star Wars that I couldn't even tell it was him. When I saw that as a kid, I thought it was just some other guy. Looking back at the movie, I also thought it was just some other guy. I had no idea. There's another movie similar to Jumper as well. where it had a similar character. I thought it might have been that same actor, but no, it turns out those are two different actors. And yeah, one of them is actually Hayden Christensen. So yeah, claimed that he literally played in nothing. He did. He played in another movie called Jumper. He also played in another movie and another movie as well. I just don't remember. He also acted years before he was even in the prequels, and I believe a TV show. So that's also not accurate. George Lucas. And then you claimed it was bad casting for Jake Lloyd. Okay, how are you going to sit there and blame George Lucas for how other people decided to treat Jake Lloyd? That makes no sense. You're blaming George for that. Then you claim it's because he was miscasted. Okay, so look at all the choices that they had. Look at the casting of Jake Lloyd. It's a very informative video, and it's on YouTube. And you saw all the other kids. Dude, not only could they not do the performance, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I don't want to get on them too harshly, they're children. Yeah, so the kids had a rough time doing it, and they weren't necessarily, those were his other options of kids that could play. They didn't really know how to perform. That's what I'm basically saying. Jake Lloyd actually knew how to act. That's shocking. He might not have been the best actor in the world, but he still had it. He knew how to act. He also kind of had a charm that I did not see from any other performer. So I could see why George Lucas picked him. Also, Jake Lloyd reminds me of Luke Skywalker. The way he talks and acts in The Phantom Menace reminds me of the way Luke Skywalker acted and talked in the original trilogy. This directly correlates and complements the original films. And this leads me to my next point. The prequel films complement the original trilogy, while the new trilogy disrespects the original trilogy and the prequels, but especially the original trilogy. It disrespects those films. So when it comes down to um, the prequels, it directly complements these films with its story. And what's interesting is that the characters directly complement the original trilogy, and they feel like one part, one cohesive whole. That's what they feel like. I could not ever imagine one without the other. They directly connect that much. And this is why when George Lucas says it's like poetry, it rhymes, I think that is so accurate. People make fun of that statement. However, I feel like that statement really, really makes sense because they connect with each other and they literally complement each other. All right. So you got on the scene. Are you an angel? Okay. Some of the dialogue's corny. There was corniness in the original trilogy. I'm just saying, some of the corniest lines in cinematic history of the original trilogy. Plus, he's just a kid. Oh my god. I like that character from Marvel, from Thor. Idris Elba played was really cool. Samuel L. Jackson played Mace Windu. He was really badass. I'm sorry. I just like the character. I get it. But here's the thing. They developed the main characters of the trilogy. They did not develop the other Jedi. That's because the movie, it's one film. You can't develop every solitary character. Many TV shows and movies have characters that they did not even develop. These are side characters. Mace Windu is not a main character. He is a side character, so he doesn't even need to be developed anyway. So that doesn't even matter in the first place. You should really be focusing on the characters that they were developing, the main characters. That includes the actual main characters of the movie, not side characters. And yeah, the guy that Idris Elba played as, I think is an amazing character, and then Mace Windu, badass as hell. And of course, the Marvel Cinematic Universe gets treated with the utmost care and love and appreciation, getting tons of different directors of creative backgrounds and history and all kinds of stuff. And then they're reading the comics and getting all into it, even though it goes against the comics and it doesn't even matter because it exists in its own universe anyway. So it's not like it's continuing an ongoing saga. Really, the MCU exists in a separate universe from the previous Marvel films, like the X-Men or Spider-Man movies. So it's like, they love that shit and eat it up, and it always connects to their ongoing MCU continuity, and then people praise it up the heavens, especially since phase 2, 1, 2, and 3, and now it's phase 4, I believe, that has finally reached criticism. Because even when the MCU came out, it had people like me who just were, I just wasn't the biggest fan. I'm just not of the MCU. I'm sorry. I like some of their movies, like Winter Soldier or the first Iron Man. but I'm not a big fan of the overall, especially movies like Civil War and Infinity War. Not a fan, just not. So that's a whole other story with that. But the thing is, look at what they do with Marvel. So much respect and appreciation for those characters and world, and just in every way. And they love that shit. But then when you see Star Wars, so much disrespect and disregard for its character, world, and universe. It is ridiculous. Doing so good that even at their lowest point, they're still killing it. Yeah, even in Phase 4, the phase that they complain about the most, guess what? They're still doing really fucking good, even then. So when they come back to the cinematic screen, you know everyone's going to go right back and be like, oh shit, everyone is going to go see it. A period. Oh yeah, they already have movies in the and they've done really successfully, and people really like them. So you see already, see that they don't even care. You know what I'm saying? They love that shit. They eat that shit up. It is crazy, and they love it. And there's so much respect and love and care put into the MCU that you will never see in Star Wars. Even at the Marvel's lowest point with its most criticism, it's still doing better than Star Wars. That speaks volumes. At one point, Star Wars was number one, and Marvel was like, I mean, aside from their movies, no one was really talking about them that much. They were only talking about a few movies that they made, just like 2 or 3. Now they're talking about Marvel is the king. They are the kings of the superhero genre. They are the kings of the cinematic genre. They have one of the most successful movies of all time. Infinity War is one of the biggest movies ever made. It's one of the most successful. I mean, oh my god, the only thing that could compete would be like The Force Awakens and some of the other ones that took the slot. So yeah, but still, okay, I'll give them that. Okay, you got The Force Awakens. All right, I can't deny that. It's been a long time since we saw a Star Wars movie, and yeah, they got there. So there is The Force Awakens. That's the one thing. I can't lie about that. And then after The Force Awakens, no one even is, dude, man. It just the, the difference of Marvel is unbelievable. Marvel is king right now. They are king. I'm not even a Marvel fan, and I have to admit it. Especially the way they treat their characters and world, so much better than the way they treat Star Wars. Unbelievable. And I'm not even a fan of the MCU admitting this. This is sad. People get on Attack of the Clones, but the romance in Pearl Harbor is definitely ain't something to write home about. It felt like a Shakespearean play when I saw Attack of the Clones, when I rewatched it. And it felt like a Shakespearean play in the Star Wars universe. Now, people have claimed that they're tired of hearing that, oh, it's Shakespearean. Okay, well, it just felt like one person who was trained to control his emotions, and he doesn't and then she is a senator. So they're not used to those kind of encounters. They're not used to that kind of life. He's a Jedi. He's trained to control his emotions. She's a political or activist, so she's not used to that kind of thing. So when you see those scenes, you're seeing two people who normally don't get in situations like that, and now they're in a situation like that. So that's pretty much how I see those scenes. Now you got on the lightsaber choreography, but that's one shot. What about the other scenes where there's so much precision and focus put into those fights? You could tell that they're really getting at each other for real, and they're doing it with a lot of precision and focus. And these are some incredibly brilliantly choreographed fights that are just so amazing and mind-blowing. How do they pull off these magnificent feats? And you can tell that even through all the movement of their lightsaber, they're actually trying to hit each other through all that, which is amazing. Are you retarded? The fight went on, and then he got his hand chopped off in the middle of battle. So what are you talking about? And they were sitting there fighting the entire time, getting at each other. And you didn't even point out the other fights that they have in the saga either. What about the fight in the Phantom Menace? What about the fight in Revenge of the Sith? What about the other fights in the movie? In Attack of the Clones, there's more than one lightsaber fight. You realize that, right? This one was 10 seconds. Out of all those fights that are in the movie, and out of all those fights in the saga, he gets on one moment for 10 seconds. One of the moments he got on was like a few seconds. And I'm like, that's what you're going to choose? You're not going to choose the actual, full-blown fights, but just one fight? You're going to single that one out and be like, they're all like this. What? There's other fights. And the other fights have different contexts as well. You didn't even go into those fights or say anything about it. At least dive into the other fights that are in the movie. Internalization is the reason why. You see, the very thing that they claim only the original trilogy has, but yet if you pay attention to the faces, something you complained about, oh, they're zooming in their faces. Maybe they're showing the internalization, the focus, the amount of, the internalization behind the fight. You know what I'm saying? This is in the prequels as well. Literally. It's just the fact that they're at a higher level of force usage. So they're using more ability. That's why they're wielding the lightsaber like that. Despite this, however, the internalization is still there. And you can see it in their facial expressions, which George Lucas does use for his storytelling quite often. And when you see that, you can see the internalization of their fight. The very thing that you complained about. Complaining about the fact that they zoomed in on their face. Yeah, to show the internalization of the lightsaber fight. I remember seeing that as a kid and I couldn't believe it. Because Yoda is at one of the highest levels of force ability you will ever see so far in the Star Wars universe. So when he moves, he moves. When I first saw this as a kid, I was blown away. When I first saw it again years later, I was blown away. The reason why it blows me away is because Yoda is using acrobatics and movement in the middle of the fight, and it's badass. It's so cool. It's just awesome. And it's, yeah, man, this is why this is one of the best fights in the whole saga. Count Dooku versus Yoda. Then he does something amazing. He shows the different feats of the Force never before seen, not even in the original trilogy, where he shoots Force lightning at Yoda, but then he absorbs it and redirects it as Force energy directly back at him. The fact that it looks that good, and that was some of the first time they used CGI, is revolutionary. Oh, and George Lucas and ILM pioneered this technology. And yet, that was their first go at that. Some of the first time they're ever using that technology, and it looks that good. Okay, so he admitted something during the Anakin and Obi-Wan fight that is absolutely awesome. You have done that yourself. Yes, bro, that was fucking awesome. Dude, there was a lot of awesome moments in that fight. Then Yoda and Sidious fighting while Anakin and Obi-Wan fighting is amazing. It's really cool. He pointed that out, and he's the one hating on these movies. That's actually true. Those were fucking awesome, yeah. So hey, you pointed out some true shit. The fights that they get on are also very short too. That's another thing. They're not even long, or they claim that they're drawn out. Okay, the Darth Maul fight is 4 minutes. The Obi-Wan and Anakin fight is 6 minutes. 2 extra minutes, and that's drawn out. It's one of the most heartbreaking scenes in the movie, and it always gets me. But why? Because you see the fall of the Jedi Order. You actually see the clone army go against the Jedi. And you see the cry of 1,000 souls before your very eyes. It's one of the most iconic and powerful scenes in the entire saga. Now, here's the thing. Those characters of the Jedi were not developed. They had to develop the main characters, not the Jedi, because remember, they're not the main characters. So if you spend time developing all these Jedi, what about the main characters? The characters they did successfully develop were the actual main characters, the people you're supposed to be developing in the story. So that's just dumb. They have scenes like this in movies with characters who are not developed to show you the impact of the environment, and yet they still say that that is brilliant or incredible, but then they get on the prequels. That's very biased. A lot of movies have done things like that. Maybe not to the magnitude or scope of the prequels, but they have actually done things like that. And when they did it, guess what? People died. People felt bad about it. And why? Because of the emotional impact of what's happening. I've seen the Jedi Order. I've seen it through the perspective of these characters. So I care when I see something like that happen to them. The characters in The Force Awakens had no character development at all, and yet people still like them. Okay? Now, I hate this because they are not developed and I don't care. But guess what? These characters don't need development because, again, they're not the main characters. In The Force Awakens, those are the main characters. They should probably be developed. Here, these are characters that don't need development because they're not the main characters. So you get to see the effect that what happened to the Jedi on the environment through that. We'll have characters in a story that are not needed to be developed because they're not the main characters. These are side characters who don't need character development. They just need to be in the story for whatever the story is trying to say through that character, or whatever they're trying to push or maneuver through. So whatever they're trying to do with that story, that's what that character is there for. So with that being said, there's no point in getting on the movie for having characters who weren't developed when the main characters were developed, the important characters. That's what's very frustrating about hearing that. So I was only asking a question: if prequels were that good, why did they split the fan base? But the new movie split the fan base as well. So what's the point of even asking? But fine, go back in time before they split the fan base, when the prequels were the only thing that split the fan base. Back then, the red letter media fans came up. And they were such a strong. They had a strong voice that when they came up, that's what started splitting people. One thing people don't recognize is when the prequels first came out, there was a bunch of fans. The Phantom Menace, when it first came out, people said it was one of the best movies they ever seen. But when the OT purists showed up, that's when the split started happening. The OT purists is the reason why the split happened. That was before. After the OT purists started splitting the fan base, because they successfully started convincing people how bad it was, because they didn't like it, because it didn't match the vision that they had for the original trilogy. That's when, the fan base eventually got split again with the new movies. So, yeah. Also, when you say split the fan base, it's funny how you say that, because really, people are still reading the comics, people are still watching all the movies, even the prequels, and people playing the games and everything back then.
I've heard this before. Even when you hear that people appreciate the films, you'll hear them just trash it, but they just appreciate like the concepts or the idea or what George was quote unquote going for instead of appreciating the actual film and story. I actually appreciate the movie and story. I think that that's a great story. That's a very unique concept. And I think that that's an incredible film. I like the actual movie. I like the cinematography. I like the storylines. I like the characters. They did a really good job with that. I like it. And then they have some of the most some of those lines and dialogue is actually really good. And they don't acknowledge that. They'll highlight the mistakes or highlight other scenes. And I'm like, what about this scene? What about that? And then those are only a few moments. There's like one hiccup, two hiccups. Then the rest of the whole movie has this great action and some really compelling dialogue. And I'm like, how come they don't acknowledge that? I don't understand that. So they just highlight the hiccups. And I'm like, I could do that with the sequel trilogy. Look at this moment. Look at that. I could even do that with the original trilogy. There's some corny ass dialogue in the original trilogy, specifically Empire Strikes Back, which has some of the corniest dialogue in the saga. And yet people quote that up as like, this is the greatest movie of all time. It's one of the greatest movies ever. It has some of the corniest dialogue in cinematic history. Really corny. And people got on George Lucas and claimed he makes corny dialogue. And I'm like, look at the dialogue in Empire. Some of that was really fucking corny. So but that's a whole other conversation. So it's like people can't accept the fact that Star Wars has always had corny ass dialogue. Just like how Cosmonaut claims that Psylocke was always a merchandisable. Yeah, but that wasn't the main focus. When Cosmonaut says that, he pisses me off because, dude, it's because now the main focus is just making money. Remember, George Lucas actually wanted to create something. And yeah, why not make money from what you create? Great. But his main focus was actually creating. He was thinking about the story. He was thinking about the characters. He wasn't just thinking about making money. It just happens that Star Wars is fucking Star Wars, very successful, and you can make money off of it. And why not? Go for it. That's different from Disney, which is only concern is just the business model. They're not. That's why they took all that stuff away and said, fuck that, and just focus on business. But that's another conversation. Imagine if you made a new trilogy like the prequels, where the Jedi fell apart again. That's what that's like. I couldn't believe it. Fred was the one defending the prequels when I'm the one that was a fan in the beginning. I'm sitting there getting on it, trashing it with the red letter media fan base. So one day after all that, I sat down. And when I sat down, I decided, you know what? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to watch these films. After all that, that's kind of fascinating. You're curious. You want to see what the fuck's going on with that. With all that different perspectives, opinions, people trashing it, period, online. And it's just like, oh my God. And people trash the hell out of these movies. And I discovered something called A Phantom Menace, the Anti-Cheese Edition, because I wanted to start an order. And everyone said that was the worst one. Back in the day, now they say the worst one is Attack of the Clones. So first it was, and then I Hate Everything in 2016, he said the worst one is Revenge of the Sith. I was like, oh my God. That really pisses me off, man. That really gets to me. But anyway, so I sat down and watched it. I got sick.
I could barely breathe. I was so sick that I could barely like move out of bed or get up like that. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I'm saying. And I was super sick back then. I won't ever forget. It was one of the worst colds I had in a long time. I was extremely sick. I remember sitting on the couch and I could barely breathe. So I would have to sit up a certain way just to breathe properly because there was that much mucus trying to fight off this huge infection I had. It was so bad. Then I sat down with my fill of marijuana, sick as fuck, and I smoked some weed. And then I started watching A Phantom Menace, the Anti-Cheese Edition. This included deleted scenes from the movie that you will not see even in the original. And then they cut tons of shit. Tons of shit. I couldn't believe it. I said, I'm going to see this with no bias. You know what? No bias, no nothing. And I was sick. So when you get sick, it's like, you got to sit down and be like, all right, enough with the criticisms. Let me just see for myself. You know, like I was sick. And I looked at it. I was shocked. I didn't just like it. I thought this actually competed with the original trilogy. And I kept rewatching the originals over and over. I seen those on TV, on Spike. Spike would play it, of course, special editions, but it didn't matter. I wouldn't find it despecialized until years later. But I didn't care. I love those movies. Great movies. But dude, this movie was special. I couldn't believe what I saw. It's like, this is the most, in one of the most profound films I've ever seen. And it's like, it's so, oh my God, like this movie blew my mind. I was so amazed. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, this movie is incredible as hell. There's so much great shit in here. What movie? I can't believe I'm seeing this movie. And it's like they're seeing a whole nother film. That's what it felt like. I couldn't believe it. I was like, holy shit. And growing up, I only really saw The Phantom Menace on Laserdisc when my dad put it on. I didn't get to just see the whole thing thoroughly. Then I said, you know what? I like this so much. I said, I want to see the whole movie unaltered and see if I'll still like it, even with all this shit in there, you know, that they cut out. Like, I want to see if I'll still actually like it, even with that in there. Now, I had to sit through it. I was like, oh, shit. You know, but it wasn't even that bad. It was just kind of goofy. And Jar Jar's jokes, as I've stated before, are so over the top and ridiculous that I find it to be kind of funny. I'm sorry. The fact that he even put that in a movie is kind of fucking hilarious, especially the fact that it's even in a Star Wars movie is kind of funny, man. And I still felt invested in what was going on. It didn't interfere with it. In The Last Jedi, they add humor. I see what he's going for, but he'll add it in the most important, pivotal moments. Right when you think something important is going to happen. Oh, wait, Luke's going to learn this and... Oh, he didn't learn shit. Oh, man. Wait, Rey's going to learn... She didn't learn shit. It's nothing. It's a fake out. That's what it felt like. That's very intentional. The jokes didn't interfere with the drama, didn't interfere with the deeper stuff and all that. It didn't. So it didn't even really matter. So people just didn't like the kind of humor, I guess. So it's like, okay, well, what the hell? People support the humor in the new trilogy, so what the... Anywho, so I saw it and then there's so many great moments in there that I couldn't believe. I was like, what the fuck? This happened and then that happened. I thought they said this movie was bad. But look at all the things that happen here. And then I could follow it. And when the scenes are really good in A Phantom Menace, in Attack of Clones, in Revenge of the Sith, they're really, really good. They're very strong. And that's something that I couldn't believe. I didn't expect that. I just thought it was just going to be just well, I didn't know what to expect, actually. I didn't think it was going to be, because I just saw it from a clear lens. I would later go to watch Attack of the Clones. I saw the anti-cheese edition of that too. And then I saw the full version of that. And then saw the full version of Revenge of the Sith. And not only did I like them, but I preferred them over the anti-cheese edition. And then it gets even deeper. The more I kept looking at it, the more I started... Dude, I ended up preferring it over the original trilogy because it's the way... It's the fact that the prequel trilogy takes what the original trilogy laid down and does it in a new way that's inspired by different eras and motifs and old stories. And I love this. This is not the way the original trilogy... The original trilogy is the grounded, ragtag group of guys and girls and stuff, people doing this crazy stuff and all that. It's a whole new ball game in the original trilogy. It's these are different versions of that style. And I love this version and that style so much. It took what made the original trilogy so special and great and did something very interesting and new with it, with these ancient motifs and stories. And I love that. And I just love that so much. I couldn't believe it. And I ended up just preferring it over the original because I just love the way they did that. That was really good. And there's so much quality in those movies that people did, I guess, just don't really acknowledge, and that really shocks me. Like, look, reassessing it years later, I noticed a lot of quality. And I'm like, oh, that's quality right there. That's quality here. Wait a minute, I thought you said this and that. You know what I'm saying? So that's my story of prequel love and then hate and then eventually preferring it over the original trilogy. So yeah, I have a deep tug of war with the prequels, of course. And these days, guys, man, people are hard on those movies. They claim. When I saw this one YouTuber, she was bringing up the prequels and saying, oh, well, you know, people are starting to appreciate it more. It's not that big deal. But let me tell you something. If you go on YouTube, type the prequels suck, the prequels still suck, the garbage, yada, 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 the Reddit, people have... Actually, I found this one Reddit. I should have saved it. I think I have it on my phone. I'll check some other time. But there are people who prefer the prequels over the original trilogy as well. That's a real thing. So yeah, I prefer it over the original trilogy. I love the original trilogy. Great movies, but the prequels are better. I like them more. And they're more interesting. They're way more interesting. I just... Oh my god. And that's the thing. So yeah, there's people who prefer to know that. And yeah, she said that people, when it comes down to the prequels, but they're still hating on it. They're hating on it profusely. They're hating on it very harshly. They do not show it any kind of mercy. They hate the prequels completely. And it's unfortunate to see. When I go on the internet, this is what I see. And that's what makes me so frustrated, because I have a history with these films. The push and the pull. I've been through it with the prequels. Here's the issue with the way people view Anakin's character. They had a false viewpoint of his character, the macho man, quote unquote, from the original trilogy. And I know this because years ago, I used to hate on the prequels with Plinkett fanboys, even though I was a fan from the beginning. I was a fan as a kid, then I fell for the red letter media hate. When I fell for the red letter media hate, one of my favorite videos on YouTube was actually an alternative trilogy to the prequel trilogy we got. And it took place on Alderaan instead of Naboo. And Anakin was depicted as that macho man-like figure, or at least a figure like that, kind of. And you really got that in Clone Wars. Because maybe you could just say that might be how I interpreted that story, I guess. But in Clone Wars, you actually got a more macho man-like figure. So when you got that macho man figure, that is the exact same representation of what people expected Anakin's character to be from Vader, misunderstanding Vader's character and then creating that character in their minds. They couldn't take the fact that Anakin didn't match that. But yet, here's what matters. Whether Anakin is a macho man or not, what matters is he a developed character. Why can't sequel fans who hate on the prequels answer this one question? Or people who hate on the prequels in general? Prequel haters, answer this question. Sequel fans, answer this question, since sequel fans tend to be prequel haters. Prequel haters, answer this question. Is Anakin a developed character? Yes, he is actually developed in the story. And his motivation is also developed in the story. Something, I'm just saying, I did not see in the new trilogy. Sorry, just mentioning that. But still, when you watch just the films. So, when it comes to Vader, because of the way he is, you misunderstood his character. Vader, I think Vader's pretty fucking badass. Yeah, I agree with fans. However, he is not just a badass. You see, there is different aspects of his character. He's a sad character. His story is a sad one. He's not just that stoic badass figure you see. There's more behind Vader's exterior. You know what I'm saying?
So it's like people didn't think about that with Vader's context. With the context given of the original trilogy, even if you separate the prequels, there's more underneath his character. Literally, when you just see the original trilogy, you can tell. So when you see the prequels, that adds up because if there's more to his exterior, it might not match with your falsified representation of a macho man.